So, back in the early 90s, there used to be this tiny drive-in movie theater in eastern Missouri, along that narrow stretch of borderline with Kentucky. I used to go there often with my two older brothers and younger sister during the weekends. We had this flatbed trailer that we would hitch up to our dad's truck. We would set up our folding chairs and grab a cooler of beer and watch the movie from our mobile platform. Most of the time, we didn't really care about what was actually playing. It was just fun to get out of the house and have the experience. I remember this night fairly well because my brother had just chipped a tooth the day before. He had an ice pack held up to his jaw. I don't remember the name of the movie we were watching. I think it was some cop movie or something maybe. I had my Empire Strikes Back t-shirt on for some reason, and I remember being barefoot as well. This was one of the first screenings of the summer, and so there were only 2 other cars in the lot. My brothers were arguing over something trivial, and my sister and I were sharing the cassette player and headphones, passing it back and forth between songs. We were all smoking and drinking and only half paying attention to the movie, when suddenly we heard someone screaming from the trees to our left. My brother snapped his flashlight up to scan the tree line. After a few seconds, an Asian girl, maybe 18 to 20 years old, came limping and stumbling out of the shadows. She was completely naked except for a plastic bag around her waist. There was also a long nylon cord tied around one of her ankles. All 4 of us immediately jumped off the flatbed and made our way over to her. She was crying and gasping for air. She collapsed to her knees by the light of my brother's flashlight, and we could see that she was bleeding from a deep gouge behind her right earlobe. She had several bruises along her arms and face, too. My older brother took off his windbreaker and put it around her, and we all began talking at once. I was suggesting we carry her to the truck, while my brothers were trying to talk to her and ask where she had come from and what had happened to leave her in this state. My sister handed her a bottle of water and was trying to talk above everyone else, proclaiming that someone needed to go find a phone and call the cops right now. I noticed another one of the drive-in customers get out of his car to take a look at what was happening. The owner of the lot was also making his way over to us. The Asian girl continued to hyperventilate and sob and kept glancing back behind her into the woods. As far as I remember, she hadn't said a single thing until that moment. Suddenly, she called out to run and tried to leap to her feet, but staggered and collapsed into my brother's arms. I glanced up and pointed towards the trees, snapping at all my siblings to shut up. I noticed 3 figures, all apparently wearing burlap sacks over their heads, carefully stepping out of the tree line. Until that moment, none of us had made note of exactly how long the cord was that the girl was dragging behind her. One of the men in the sacks took a few careful steps forward until he was about 10 yards away. He placed his foot down on the end of the cord line. The frantic girl started screaming. My sister and I were cursing at these masked men. One of my brothers picked up a rock and told them to back off. None of the men moved. I remember scanning all of them for any signs of a weapon, but they didn't appear to have any. They were still mostly in the shadows, though. The only way I could really see them was from the glare of the movie screen and the wandering beam of my brother's flashlight. As I type this out, I understand how ludicrous this must sound. Even thinking back on it, I have to constantly remind myself it wasn't just a dream or something I saw in a horror movie or something. I was on the front lines of a terrifying standoff that nearly resulted in bloodshed. The owner of the drive finally caught up with us and immediately raised his shotgun directly at the face of the closest masked man. He told him to get the fuck out of his property. I heard the sounds of tires rolling across gravel and glanced back toward the entrance to see 2 pickup trucks pull up, their headlights pointing right at our group. For a split second, I thought they were coming to help us, but then I noticed the deer skulls mounted on their hoods. The trucks just sat there idling, as silent as the 3 masked men in front of us. The owner didn't turn around and didn't even flinch. He called out again that if they didn't get off his property right now, no matter what those guys on the trucks tried to do, he was going to gun down all 3 of them at least. My brother, not holding the rock, had been frantically working his bare fingers at the knot of the cord around the girl's ankles, but to no avail. A lingering silence followed. It was right then when a thought crossed my mind that we might all die right here. After a few moments, though, the man removed his foot from the cord and took several steps back towards the woods. His friends followed suit without turning their backs on us, and they disappeared into the shadows. The 2 pickup trucks also spun out loudly on the gravel and took off down the road. The police arrived shortly after with an ambulance for the girl. A few officers combed the woods, but they didn't find anything the masked men had left behind. It turned out the girl did not speak much English. She claimed her name was Hildegard, but that always felt made up to me for some reason. A week or so, a man's body was found in those very same woods by hunters. He had been beaten to death and had other various despicable things done to him. I think it was those burlap sack men who had done this to him. We never saw or heard from the Asian girl again, though we did inquire at the police station and hospital about her several times. I know a different TV news van showed up at the drive-in, but the owner refused to give an interview and chased them off his property. Regardless of the event being reported and televised, though, the word got around eventually, and the drive-in officially closed in 1992. The 4 of us were there at the last screening before it closed for good. The entire last week, the drive-in was playing Batman Returns. We saw it 3 times. My eyes weren't really on the screen, though. More often than not, I was glancing over to the spot where the girl had emerged from the woods. I was always nervous a masked figure might be standing there, staring back at me. Okay, so my brother is really creepy. We have about a 3-year age gap between us. When we were younger, he used to love to scare the shit out of me. My parents used to just think it was kids being kids, but as we got older, it got worse and worse. He used to walk out of the kitchen holding a knife and just stare at me with it in his hand. My parents would never believe me when I would say something, though. As we continued to grow older, he became more violent as well. He used to try to physically fight me. It wouldn't just be play fighting, though. There were actual kicks and punches involved. Since I was a lot smaller, I would come out with real injuries and bruises as well. Eventually, he grew more touchy. He would brush up against me and just touch my lower back. At first, I thought it was just an accident, but he kept going lower. Eventually, I caught on it was not so accidental. I told him to stop every time, but he never would. Eventually, I had to start yelling at him to stop so other people could hear. He did for a while, but still here and there he would attempt to do it. Recently, as in 2 months ago, I turned 18 when I discovered a hidden camera in my bathroom. I instantly knew it was his. I took it out of its hiding place and removed the SD card. I put the SD card in a lockbox and hid the camera in my room as well. 2 days later, I discovered the camera had disappeared from my room. Luckily, I still had the SD card locked up tight. About a month after, I discovered a new clock in the bathroom. I thought my mom had bought it at first. Still though, I checked the bathroom for more cameras and I didn't see any on the clock. Out of precaution though, I always had it covered or unplugged. Last week, I found the old camera replaced with a new one. I asked my mom today if she was the one who had bought the clock for the bathroom. She said she thought I had bought it. Right away, I went and checked for a camera after, and I discovered that one had been placed inside. That isn't the only weird thing. At night, he paces up and down our hallway, most nights actually. Only for a few minutes at a time though. Sometimes he'll knock on my door or just stare at me when I'm not in my room. Right now, I'm in the process of sweeping my room for cameras. I still have no idea how he found that other one I hid away, which literally freaks me out. I have no idea what to do. I know I should probably tell my mom. He gives me serial killer vibes. I'm not sure if she'll believe the full extent of his actions, though. I'm also saving to get my own apartment, so hopefully I can just move out and never have to interact with him again. During the spring of 2004, I was 19 even though I only looked to be about 14. I was all of 5'0" and weighed about 100 pounds soaking wet. That's if I was carrying laundry as well. My parents and aunt were vacationing in Mexico. I decided to opt out of this one though and stay at the house. I figured it would be a nice opportunity to have a quiet place to study for my upcoming exams. All I really had to do was clean the pool, collect the mail, and restock the fridge with groceries. I also had a plan of action that involved emptying her safe and rescuing her car in the event of a wildfire taking place or something. Her home was high up in the hills of Southern California after all. It had a terrific view of Long Beach. I mostly spent my time in the massage chair in the guest room, playing music in the background while I pored over my psychology notes. Occasionally, I would sit out on the balcony as well and work on my tan a bit or use the treadmill in the basement. Mostly, I was secluded in the air conditioning trying to be productive every night though. I never forgot every night to set the alarm and make sure the security cameras were working fine before I went to bed. On the 4th night of my stay, though, I was really focused on the books, and so I forgot to set the alarm after it got dark. At about 1:30 a.m., I paused to take a brief break, and that's when I realized just how late it was. My stomach sank as I remembered the basement door was still unlocked. I had to secure that before setting the alarm. Before heading downstairs, though, I wandered into the study to get a look at the security cameras just to be safe. I remember thinking to myself, what are the chances someone will actually be inside the house anyway? As soon as I finished processing that thought though, I noticed a figure on the basement stairs in one of the cameras. I remember my mouth falling open and making a small croaking sound. There was a middle-aged, balding man with glasses, slowly making his way up the stairs. To make the situation even more unnerving, I could see in one of his hands he appeared to be holding a balloon or something. I stared at the cameras as he reached the top of the basement stairs and looked around before cautiously trying to set foot into the kitchen. My first thought was to slam the door, lock it, and call the cops. But deep down, I knew it would take the police between 10 and 12 minutes just to make it out here, and in that time the guy could easily overpower me and drag me off into the night. I suppose I could have hidden somewhere as well, but I didn't like the idea of trying to stay quiet while this guy wandered freely from room to room searching for me. Instead, I decided to go on the offensive and try something that was both incredibly daring and amazingly stupid. I tiptoed back into my room, turned up the music, and then made a loud production of exiting the room. Stamping my feet down the hall, I called out as loud as possible, "Marcus, I swear I heard something downstairs. Go put your shirt on and grab the key to the gun cabinet." I was positive my voice was quivering as I said it, but I figured the music playing in the background would hide the fact well enough. I paused for a few moments, waiting to see if he would call my bluff. When all I heard was silence from down below, I power-walked back into the study, locked the door, and checked the cameras again. Sure enough, he was scampering out the basement door like a frightened squirrel. I watched him run across the backyard around the pool and disappear between the hedges. As soon as he cleared the house, he let go of his balloon, and I watched it from my window as it fluttered away towards the Pacific. I ran downstairs and locked the basement door immediately. I set the alarm and called the cops. I also called my parents and my aunt and told them what happened. I asked them how I could rewind the footage to show the police. My aunt asked me why I didn't just hit the panic alarm on the security pad. I had to admit I hadn't even thought about that. To make a long story short, the police caught the guy a week later. He was sleeping in his car in the grocery store parking lot. Everyone always asks me what I thought the balloon was all about. If I had to guess, I think maybe it was a gift or something. The guy must have seen me a few times outside the house and assumed that I was alone. Maybe because of my appearance, he thought I was much younger than I actually was. I really have no idea if the guy is still in prison, but regardless of where he is, I hope he hears this and feels stupid that he got scared away by basically nothing. An empty threat by a panicked girl with all the strength of a malnourished gerbil. There's a happy ending to this story. I'm 6'8" and somewhat of a bodybuilder. I have a buzz cut and at least 30 tattoos over my body. Plot twist, I'm also a lesbian. What happened here was not really my problem, but I decided to stick my nose in because I'm not a heartless asshole. For some reference, people who know me always say the very first thing they thought when they met me was, "Damn, she looks fucking scary." My nickname is GG, short for Gentle Giant because I'm so big. This was happening to a girl when I was at the store. I was at the Target just trying to grab some mac and cheese and be on my way. As I walked down the aisle though, I saw a woman backed up against the shelf and cornered by a man. He was wearing this big gray coat, which was kind of weird because it was 90 degrees out. She shot me a look of surprise and alert, then looked back at the guy quickly. I have bad hearing and am almost deaf in one ear, so I couldn't make out whatever the man was saying. I started walking forward and caught the very end of what he was saying though. The guy, we're gonna call him Max, was harassing this girl. "The red one is yours, right? I'll meet you there and we can go back to my place. That sound fun, doll?" Max asked. His voice made me wish I was actually deaf. "Hey, sorry I took so long. I had to help some lady out. Who's our new friend here?" I stepped next to the woman and asked her about the man. She let out a sigh of relief when he turned my way. The guy looked up at me in confusion, then looked back to her. "Who's this, doll?" "I'm her girlfriend. What do you want?" I asked cautiously. "Well, me and her are gonna go back to my place." "No, you're not. Come on, let's go. We're not coming back to this Target. It has a Walmart problem I can see." I watched as the girl nodded frantically and speed walked over to me. "Are you really going to go with this chick? I'll show you the right side. I bet I can change your mind even." He yelled and took off after us. We had started walking away in the middle of his speech. I already told her I was going to walk with her because I was sure he would try to come after her. She was a pretty short girl if you wanted to know. As soon as I said that, I felt the guy ram into my back a second later. He was only 5'6" and didn't have much muscle on him, a pretty skinny guy from what I could see, so his attack didn't really do much to me. He started yelling and screaming while following us and trying to hit me in the back. We made it to a worker who called the police, and they took him away in handcuffs. The whole time he was punching me and hitting me in the back, he was also trying to grab her and failing horribly. It might not seem that scary from my perspective, but I'm pretty sure it was really frightening from hers. Funny thing is, I stayed with her the rest of the trip and walked her to her car. She gave me her number as well, so we'll see where that goes. So my stupid brand new water heater broke down from all the calcium and things in the water. We rented a hotel room so we could all take a shower still. My husband and teenage daughters went first. While they took their showers, I had already been looking for cameras, after shows and articles depicting warnings to check had really left me paranoid. My husband laughed at me and made fun of me for this. I thought we were fairly safe. It wasn't until I was actually standing inside the shower, though, that I finally noticed a camera. You could only see it from a certain angle. It had a cover on the bottom of it too, but an opening all the way around the edges in the middle. I looked up and there it was. I screamed and my husband came running in. I showed him the area. He checked and sure enough, he took the bottom cover off and the camera fell right down. It was actually wired to the light and set to look down and point towards the shower. My husband ripped it out and marched straight to the office, where a fight then ensued. The creepy guy there got pissed that my husband was destroying his room and called the cops. My husband was quite the hothead when he's on a moral mission though, so he grabbed the guy up by his collar. His mentality was sort of, if I'm going to go to jail, then I'm going to make it worth it. The guy's wife came out and by then I was dressed in there for backup. She wanted to know what was happening, so I told her exactly what happened. She said to wait right there. She grabbed a knife from her room and started chasing the owner around with it to our surprise. When the cops showed up, they asked us what happened. We told them. They took the owner in and apparently found hundreds of videos in a private nook in his bedroom that they're using to build a case on him with. So make sure to beware and check everywhere before undressing in your hotel room. So this happened last year when I was house sitting for my neighbor. He was in the hospital for a few days, recovering from a surgery. I had been asked to stay in the house and keep an eye on his cats for him. The house was pretty small, but it was on a nice wide open property right by the woods. There was this tiny swinging cat flap on the kitchen door where the cats would come and go as they pleased throughout the day. The flap led into a screened-in back porch, and the house only had one bedroom. I chose to sleep on the couch in the living room. After cleaning up, feeding the cats, and watching some TV, I turned off all the lights and laid back down on the couch. I had my phone out now, and I was casually scrolling down through Facebook. That was when I heard the flap swinging back and forth. From where I was in the living room, I couldn't see the door. The counter was in the way. I glanced over to see one of the cats scamper over and leap up onto my leg. I gave it a welcoming pat on the head and continued scrolling. After another minute though, I heard the cat door make a noise again. A soft squeak this time. I didn't even glance over, figuring it was a second cat following the first back into the house. After a few moments passed by though, I heard the squeaking sound again, and after another moment, it squeaked a third time. I looked up from my phone, wondering why this second cat was jumping in and out like that. I was wondering if I would have to scoop it up and put it in the bedroom myself. The door continued to squeak for another couple of minutes as the second cat continued to jump in and out. I finally decided I'd had enough of this noise. I put my phone down and sat up on the couch. I began to stretch a bit, and as I did, I happened to glance behind the couch. My blood froze. The second cat was right there, curled up in its bed in the corner. The first cat was still nestled between my legs. My confusion turned to fear instantly. Was there another animal on the back porch? Another cat, maybe? I slowly stood up and quietly made my way over to the back door, tiptoeing across the carpet in my socks. The door continued making its squeaking noises over and over again. I peered carefully around the counter and felt the sensation of my heart leaping up into my throat. At the same moment, my stomach dropped. By the faint rays of the nightlight in the hallway, I could see an arm reaching through the cat door, straining to get at the knob. The fingertips were brushing at the lock. For a few short seconds, all I could do was stare in terror, frozen by the surreal, silent reality of what I was seeing in front of me. It almost didn't feel real. The severity of this situation hit me all at once, and I realized that if this intruder got in, I was not going to stand a chance. I grabbed a large two-pronged fork used for flipping steaks on the grill, and in one swift motion, I stabbed that arm right below the wrist as hard as I could. There came a thunderous scream of pain from the other side of the door, and their arm was immediately retracted through the flap. The fork had impaled itself in the intruder though, so it caught itself on the door. That produced a second loud scream, and the arm wrenched violently outside. I heard the fork clatter on the ground, and then I heard footsteps sprinting across the back porch and out the screen door. I immediately turned on the outside lights and caught a glimpse of a figure running towards the woods. Instead of calling the cops though, I scooped up both cats and stuffed them into the same carrier. I grabbed my phone, my shoes, and sprinted out to my car, which was thankfully parked inside the garage. I drove up the road a couple of miles to my own place, and once I was safely inside, I called the police. The cops took a half an hour to get to my place, and then another half hour of questioning before they continued down the road to check out my neighbor's house. They told me there was no sign the screen door had been broken into, and aside from the blood stains, there was no sign of the intruder either. They put out an alert to local hospitals for a man with a stab wound on his right arm. The following morning, the police brought a dog out to follow the scent as well, but whoever the lucky bastard was, he was never caught. I kept the cats safe at my place until my neighbor was out of the hospital. It still shakes me to my soul, the idea that that stranger chose that house in the middle of nowhere, trying to get inside. If I hadn't decided to get off the couch when I did, this may have ended very differently. "7 years ago, I was on my way home after getting off work late one night. I was sitting at a red light at an intersection, trying to keep my eyes open. I was extremely tired, but I was also right around the corner from my house. My eyes scanned around the empty intersection I was sitting at, and there was nobody around. Just as I started to press the gas pedal, I glanced in all of my mirrors and just about fainted when I thought I saw a face in my rear view. My eyes jolted wide, and I hit the brake in the middle of the intersection. I stared back into the rear view mirror, but I didn't see anything. I turned around as much as I could and scanned the back seat. There was nothing there. I made it home a couple of minutes later and quickly went inside. I walked first to my bedroom. I put my cell phone on my bed and took off my work boots and stored them away in my closet. I then walked back out to my living room and peeked out through the blinds. I saw a man sitting there in my back seat. I've never felt any fear like this before. It felt like all my blood left my body, and ice water began flowing through my veins. I ran back to my room, grabbed my phone, and as I was dialing 911, out my room window, I could see the back door of my car was now open, and the man was already gone. I slept at my brother's house that night. I've had 2 encounters in my life I think you will all appreciate. After thinking it over, I decided to share the one that terrified me the most though, to the point of sheer paranoia. For the record, I'm a 28-year-old man, and this happened just last year in a major southern US city. Given the nature of what happened, I'm not comfortable sharing the precise city and locations. My best friend Lauren and I took advantage of an extended weekend to visit several of our close friends, whom had all moved to said city. For clarity, their names will be Jacob, Jessica, Bailey, and Tim. Conveniently, they also all lived in the same house, which is important. We had no shortage of fun and eventful moments Thursday and Friday, but Saturday night is where it all started to kick off. We went to this arcade bar that had damn near every arcade game in history, plus all the new fighting games converted to an arcade style. Jacob and I have a pretty mean geek streak, so this was pure bliss for us. Getting to dominate in Tekken, Injustice, TMNT, more Tekken. Lauren was also having a blast with us, but Bailey and Jessica were struggling to find enjoyment, bless their hearts. Tim had to work a sudden night shift, so he had to leave. Eventually, they decided to grab an Uber to their favorite country/line dancing bar. I'd been before, and country is just not my thing, so I stuck with the barcade. Eventually, Lauren decided to take an Uber to the country bar as well. She'd never been there and was curious to see what it was like. Planning to fully regroup when the barcade closed, we set up a group chat and told Jessica and Bailey that Lauren was coming and to meet her at the front, since it was a massive place. Off they all went. I don't remember how much time had passed by, but I received a text from Lauren telling me she couldn't find Bailey anywhere, and Jessica had already gone home. Jacob and I decided to drive over, pick up Lauren, and head back. We figured Bailey was with the guy she was interested in at the time, hence her radio silence. After the 20-minute drive to the bar, I called Lauren, told her we were out front, only for her to respond with, "It's okay, I'm gonna stay a while longer." "Are you sure you want to stay?" I asked. She said yes, plainly. With no other option, I asked that she let us know when she headed back, and to be safe, Jacob and I drove back to the house. Before I go any further, I need to describe the layout of this home. It's a traditional 2-bedroom house, with the office room having been converted for an extra bedroom. This house also had no curtains or blinds on any windows, and there were 2 massive ones in the living room, looking out into the main road. In the backyard, there was a garage that had its own mini home attached to it. This is where Jacob lives, and I was sleeping there for the weekend. Once we got back, we had 1 or 2 more drinks. When at around 2:30 a.m., I got a text from Lauren saying she was on her way back. With that, I went over to the futon and passed out. I was jolted awake to the sound of the door being burst open and someone shouting at us. It was Bailey. She was screaming, frantically demanding to know where Lauren was. My watch now read 4:30, and I felt an uneasy feeling in my stomach. It took Jacob and I 15 minutes to get home, so where the hell was she then? She hadn't answered or returned any of Bailey's calls since the last text. Jacob was so drunk he couldn't stay awake, so it was on Bailey and I to try and find her. I called Lauren, and luckily she picked up. Having known her for 10 years, I could tell she was both highly intoxicated and scared. This in turn scared me even more. Obviously, I asked where the hell she was and if she was okay. She aggravatingly responded that she was fine, and in an Uber headed to the house about 15 minutes away. I couldn't get any more information from her. She said she needed to hang up so she could use her GPS to get home. Why would she need to use GPS if she had an Uber? 15 minutes on the dot and no sign of Lauren arriving. I was ready to turn the whole damn town upside down, but called 1 more time. She picked up sounding just as agitated, but this time I heard more than one voice on the other end, before they all hushed at the same time. As I started asking her all the details of the Uber car driver and passengers, she told me it was a red Toyota sedan and she was 3 minutes away, hanging up once again abruptly. Not taking any chances, I quickly put on a shirt and some pants and grabbed some knives, ready for a potential mess with whoever these guys might be. I waited on the front porch, Bailey ready to call 911 in the event things went south. Roughly 3 minutes later, a vehicle slowed towards our driveway, a white pickup truck. The passenger door opened and out jumped Lauren, exiting with some haste and not even bothering to close the door or look back. She didn't say a word to the driver. I could clearly see 3 other men in the truck, but I couldn't get any specifics before one of them quickly shut the door. As we both rushed to Lauren's side to help her in, she was dead silent and stumbling into the house. After what she told us, I had plenty of reason to believe these guys were traffickers. 1, she was all alone and lost in the bar when a guy came up to her and asked her to dance. When she agreed, another guy came and grabbed her phone and wallet with the excuse it would make dancing easier. How easy it would be to check her ID and see she was not from this area and appeared to be on her own, plus they could use that as means to keep her from leaving. They took her to a separate room where a bunch of guys had her drink a shitload of booze. She was too intoxicated to drive, and she wouldn't look drugged, making it easy to slip her past security under the guise of being too drunk to drive. They said they knew the address to which she wanted to go, but knew a shortcut. Lauren's too smart to fall for that, which is why she pulled up her GPS. Once I called, they must have realized people were waiting for her. After she told us all of this in the living room, we noticed the truck had not left, only turned its headlights off. Once I turned the lights off, they finally did leave. No couch for tonight. She was definitely sharing a bed with someone that night. We made sure every single door and window was locked. I went back to the garage house, only to learn the front door did not properly lock. Well, what a great thing to happen tonight. The only brilliant idea I had was to place a bunch of beer cans from the weekend against the door, so we'd hear them clatter if it opened. By this point, it was about 5 in the morning. Still no sun and knife under my pillow. Back to sleep I went. I was pretty confident the ordeal had now passed, but I was disturbed at the thought these were likely some dangerous people, and now they knew where all my friends lived. Not even an hour later, I woke again to a sound by the door. Sure enough, it was the sound of beer cans clattering on the tile floor, followed by the door quickly but quietly being shut again. Knife in hand and ready to piss a river, I was confronted with 2 immediate choices. 1, check the window if anyone outside was fleeing, or 2, check the interior for any intruders. I chose the latter, simply forgetting to call my friends or 911. I was too scared and tired. I kept checking every room and corner, underneath Jacob's bed and the garage. If the situation weren't already terrifying, that garage at night would be a phenomenal prop for a horror movie. After concluding that Jacob and I were the only ones inside, I checked the beer cans on the floor. It was not my imagination or a dream. Someone had just tried to get in. I looked out the window for the first time and found nothing out of the ordinary. I had given whoever had came snooping plenty of time to run or hide though. Thinking only for the safety of my friends inside the main house, I made another stupid decision. I stepped outside and checked the perimeter all by myself. It was still incredibly dark out. The only light available was by a dim backyard light they keep perpetually on, and my flashlight. There were no cars at this time of night. No dogs barking. I can't even remember hearing any birds or insects. The silence was unholy. I was listening for footsteps or breathing, expecting to see someone at every turn of my flashlight. Nobody was in the backyard, so I checked the windows and doors for any signs of disturbance that I could tell. I could see directly into the office bedroom, which made me feel sick at the thought of someone with ill intentions peering in to see who was sleeping there. Fortunately, my search was anticlimactic. I didn't find anyone sticking around. I hauled ass back into the garage house, relieved myself, rearranged the beer cans against the door, and stayed awake and alert until the adrenaline dump sent me to sleep. My watch read 11:30ish when I woke up, and as far as I know, nothing further happened. I updated the hungover Jacob about what went down less than 12 hours ago. He simply responded, "Well, shit." I found that rather funny, given how high-strung I was in handling the situation. I didn't want to, but I asked everyone if they tried to get into the garage house after Lauren was back home. Of course, nobody said they did. I only told Jacob about my personal ordeal in hopes he would get that lock fixed. I didn't want to freak anyone else out more than they already were. 2 months later, when Lauren and I came back to see them, I told them everything. I was most pleased to see the lock had been fixed in the meantime, and there are now blinds on nearly every window. Lessons learned, I suppose. My childhood home was in a small town in Indiana. It was a beautiful blue Dutch colonial home in a neighborhood lined with huge old pine trees. Our house had been built in the 1800s, and I always had a sense there was something wrong about it. The neighborhood was filled with kids my age, and all of the families got together for summer block parties. Pretty idyllic. The only bad thing about our neighborhood was that at the end of the cul-de-sac was the town's hospital. The hospital kind of looked like a brick version of Hogwarts or something. It wasn't too bad, except that the parking lot and entrance for the emergency room were essentially backed up to several of our backyards every once in a while. We would also be woken up by an ambulance, and on special occasions a helicopter would land right behind our house to fly a patient to Indianapolis or Cincinnati. The adults would bring us little kids out in our pajamas to watch it land and take off. Kind of morbid, I realize now. Other than the noise and bustle of the emergency room, we rarely noticed the hospital though. Sometimes we would tell ghost stories about all the people who died there and how they wandered to our neighborhood in the afterlife. One night in early January, several inches of snow had fallen in a few hours. As a second grader, I was looking forward to the prospect of a snow day and stayed up later than usual. I finally fell asleep though. All was quiet, and the snow even muffled the ambulances going in and out in the night. Sometimes in the middle of the night I would wake up though. You know, when you notice something in your sleep and it snaps you awake. It was one of those instances. I sat up but didn't hear anything at first. I didn't see any light from under my parents' bedroom, so I knew they were still asleep. I laid back down and tried to get back to sleep myself. That was when the noise that had woken me up began again. It was a noise that still haunts me to this day. There was a low moan and somebody quietly sobbing. I was perfectly still, trying to make sure I was hearing a person. Indeed, I heard the low moan turn into a sad "help me" over and over. I could tell it was coming from downstairs. I snuck out of my bed. My bedroom was at the top of our staircase, and looking down it, I could see right out the back door and onto our back deck. I could see several inches of snow blown up against the glass sliding door. The moaning continued. I was convinced it was coming from downstairs. I crept to the top of the carpeted stairs and hunched down to listen. As soon as I crouched down, I saw her. There was a woman standing at our back door. Her hair was frozen from the snow, and she was wearing a hospital gown. Her tears were frozen on her cheeks, and she was barefoot. She looked right through the door and up at me. I froze, and her moaning got louder. She began to pull at her gown and a bandage on her arm. When she looked away from me, I felt like I could finally move again. I bolted right to my dad and mom and woke my dad up crying that a woman was standing at our back door in the snow. He ran to the stairs and saw the woman as well and immediately dialed 911. It turns out it was a patient in the dementia wing that had somehow gotten out barefoot and gotten lost. She had found her way to our house. The orderlies quickly came and got her. I don't know if she lived much longer after that though. She had to have had hypothermia. After that, we tried to avoid the hospital. My family moved from that home several years later. On particularly cold and snowy nights though, I sometimes still have dreams about that unfortunate woman. What a terrifying experience.